Hello and welcome back. Now, the final report into how a fire at a substation forced Heathrow Airport to close has been released. Heathrow descended into chaos when all flights in and out were cancelled in March this year, affecting more than 250,000 journeys. Well, we can speak now to the Chief Exec of National Energy System Operator, Fintan Slye, who's with us now. Fintan, good morning to you. Thanks so much for coming in. I'm going to bring you in a moment and ask you about this report, but we've got a Science and Technology Editor, Tom Clark, with us, and there's been some news since this has been released, hasn't it, Tom?
Just a quick update. So Ofgem, which is the energy regulator, has said, in light of this report and what it's found, and I think one of the critical things here, and I'm sure Fintan will tell us more, is this fault in the transformer that caught fire and led to this failure was spotted back in 2018. It was a Category 1 fault that should have been acted on immediately, and somehow it fell through the net. So I think that's going to form maybe one of the key parts of that investigation. So yeah, Ofgem have announced they're going to conduct an enforcement investigation into what happened to see that National Grid is doing the job it's supposed to do in return for the money that we as bill payers give to it. Yeah,
so Fintan, on this report then, as Tom's pointed out, there seems to have been a fault with one of the transformers. How has that been allowed to happen? I mean, these are old bits of kit. They're well maintained, as we're told, but still there was a catastrophic fault that led to this.
There was, and I suppose we must acknowledge it was a really significant event that impacted, lots of people in the local community, and then Heathrow with lots of people's journeys disrupted. What happened was that it transforms a really big piece of equipment, electrical equipment, and what we saw was that there was moisture ingress into that, so a fault on the bushing of the transformer, which is where some of the connectors come out of it. A fault on that allowed some moisture to get into the transformer, and over time then that created a fault. There was an electrical arc, and there's oil in that transformer, and the electrical arc caused the oil to catch fire. And on that evening, or that Thursday evening in March, that transformer then caught fire, and that was the root cause of what happened there.
And as Tom says, wasn't that identified back in 2018?
Yeah, so in 2018, as part of some oil sampling, there was high moisture content identified at that point in time. So a missed opportunity there to replace that bushing, fix that seal, which would have prevented the incident.
Whose job is it to switch that out, though, once they see that report? I mean, where does that report go? What's the sort of the chain of command once that report is published, it's found? How does it pass up the line, and who decides to do it?
So this is a National Grid substation, and it's their transformer, and they would have conducted the maintenance on it. They would have taken the oil sampling, and then just due to a failure on the day, the action. So they identified the moisture readings. What they didn't do was then take that out of commission and make the changes. So a missed opportunity there back in 2018 to remedy
Very
this.
Expensive missed opportunity.
Well, and the other thing that's interesting, I mean, this is old kit. I mean, I think one of the things that I found fascinating, I was reading into these bushings. And this kit was built back in the 1960s. The bushings are made of paper and foil, wrapped and submerged in oil. That's what gives them their ability. That's a very good resistor. But paper absorbs moisture as well as oil, and that makes them sort of fundamentally vulnerable over time to this. And if you think about the fact this transformer had been operated for 57 years, it was before I was born. These faults happen, these bushings have to be replaced. There is higher tech kit you can put in that someone actually has to come along and take a sample of that oil, check it for moisture. It's a manual thing. There's better kit that you can use to do that remotely. National Grid, according to the report, in 2018 asked for were given 18.65 million, allowed by Ofgem to apply for that money to put in some of this kit. For some reason, it wasn't put on North Hyde transformer. It wasn't seen as a priority. This is an old transformer linked to a piece of critical national infrastructure. So there's that piece, that kind of why in this digital age we've got a kit that is getting old, that hasn't got the best stuff. And also I think another key thing in this report, grid operators don't know who's critical national infrastructure on the network, and they don't have priority. I mean, surely that's something that NESO has to address if one of our roles is to modernise the grid.
Yeah, and that is one of the recommendations, is to look at that piece around how do you get more joined up plans around resilience and response plans between the energy industry and that critical national infrastructure. Because the critical national infrastructure, it's really the essential services that we all depend on in society and the economy. And one of the findings of the report really was that we didn't have that joined up view between the energy networks and the critical national infrastructure. And as you say, at the moment, those critical national infrastructure facilities don't tell the energy networks that, hey, we're critical national infrastructure. It's really important that you make sure that this substation is maintained, protected in a particular way.
And what about the age of this kit? I mean, obviously it's doing pretty well. But some of these things are getting really very old now. They're coming to the end of their natural lives. I think this is an illustration of what can go wrong if they're not really well maintained, and I imagine the cost of maintenance is going to go up. As we rewire the grid for net zero, etc., have the costs of replacing all this kit been factored in as well? The fact we've got an upgrade of the existing system that needs paying for, as well as all that new grid that we need for the renewables and stuff.
So yeah, I mean, it's a really good point. But I mean, transmission assets tend to be relatively long-lived and, you know, maintained over their life. So National Grid will have a programme to refurbish and replace all its assets as they come due, and it will look at the condition of those assets to make sure that that's done at the appropriate time. I think what we saw here, they had done the oil sampling, so they'd done all of the testing, and it had identified, and they had process and procedures then to take it out of service, but there was just a gap there, and that didn't get caught in their maintenance system. And I think one of the things we found is that process piece was missing.
Fintan, what changes can we expect in the future so this doesn't happen again? You know, more than 270,000 passengers were stranded, money lost. It was a huge headache at the time for so many people.
It really was. And I suppose maybe just to start by saying we do have one of the most resilient electricity and energy systems in the world. Events like this are incredibly rare, but we must make sure when they do happen, we take the learnings from them and we make sure they're implemented. So the report makes a series of 12 recommendations, and they include processes and controls around asset maintenance, how fire and risk assessments are done at substations, the resilience of critical national infrastructure and how to improve it, and also how you get that coordination, as we were talking about earlier, between the energy industry and those critical national infrastructure.
If something like this happened tomorrow, what would happen?
So we don't expect something like this to happen tomorrow.
Are we covered? Are we going to see more planes grounded, more passengers stranded? It doesn't feel like we're completely covered.
Well, I think obviously immediately following this happening, we know that National Grid did a complete audit of all of their maintenance records and all of their process and procedures to be sure there wasn't something else in there, which is what you'd expect, and they've done that, and that really is great. And you mentioned that Ofgem are going to do an investigation as well. But I think because this has happened and because now of the recommendations, we have greater surety that there isn't something else like this sitting out there.
It's good having you here this morning. I appreciate you answering the questions, but it feels like National Grid should be answering some of these questions as to how they managed to, how did you describe it? You didn't quite say drop the ball, but the missed opportunity. Mm-hmm. Very expensive missed opportunity, and all the processes that you describe as being the learned recommendations, surely they were in place anyway, that when you find oil in one of these, when you find air in one of these things, you refer that up and you get it switched out. You
do, and you know, they found the oil, and I think the miss was that there wasn't the control within their asset management systems that identified that this got missed.
I don't understand what that means, control within asset management systems.
So they identified the issue with oil in the transformer, so identified a fault.
Yeah.
For some reason, the transformer didn't immediately get pulled out of service and it get repaired.
So someone didn't do the job properly.
Yeah, and I suppose the other macro issue is there was no control within their system that looked back and said, oh, hang on a second, you forgot to do this thing over here.
Yeah.
So
we need to
have one more question, because I just think there's a business resilience question here as well, though. So Heathrow Airport, it appears they were relying on the grid to keep operating. And yet it did turn out they were making an assumption, and they thought they had more resilience. They did. You know, they had 3 inputs. They had enough power to keep running. Are there questions in there how businesses assume reliability, especially when they're as critical as Heathrow?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the learnings here, and you know, talked earlier about missed opportunities, was Heathrow does have 3 independent electricity substations that supply them, and 2 of those continued uninterrupted. But the one that did fail supplied some critical infrastructure across the airport, which meant that they had to shut it down.
Sorry to rush you, but thank you very much for being with us.
No problem, pleasure.
Good to have you. Good morning to you. All right.